Welcome to OLC 4.0. This is term 1A. We are on class number 7, and we're working on lesson 4, the readings and the practice. It is September 11th, 2025, and this is Jillian Percy. There we go. Here are all the ways to contact us. So I don't know if you guys can see the little black thing there. Okay. If you want to talk to me in the studio, 1-800-465-7144. Keep in mind, when you do that, I am on air and you will also be on air as well. The office phone number is 1-800-667-3703. No one is here past 4:30 to answer it. Like, I physically am here, but no one else is there to answer the phone. But you can email me if you want to. My email is jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. I also have an alternate email, jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. That is the one people usually use if they're trying to share Google Documents with me. My Facebook is capital G, capital P, E-R-C-Y, space, capital W-A-H-S-A. And you can see down there, it's got this little market scene and me in a little black dress. And then there's 2 different YouTube channels that have the classes on it. There's my teacher channel, which is G Percy WASA, and has all the classes I've taught at WASA for the last 3-ish years. And then the WASA Distance Education YouTube channel, which has last year's classes and this year's classes. Keep in mind, there is sometimes a day or 2 delay from when I record them to when they get posted, okay? Excuse me. Okay, how to hand in assignments. Most importantly, rather than just handing it in to me, send it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. When you do that, it gets logged that you submitted the work. So if there's ever any doubt about it, it all goes into a binder, we can check it, it's right there. The other thing is, if someone else took over the course, or you needed to finish it next year, we would still have access to it in that database, where if it's in my email, no one can access my email but me, okay? Always make sure that your full name, the course name, the assignment number and name are right on the physical page, not just in the email, but on the physical page, because I don't see the email. It gets printed off and put into my mailbox, my marking pile. So all I see is what you've put at the top, okay? If there is a rough draft or a good draft, please label which one is which, so that I know what I'm marking, because I have different marking schemes for them, and sometimes they're worth a different amount of marks. If you're handing in assignments, there are so many ways you can do it. Whatever works best for you is just fine. If you have a learning center in your community, then you can ask the DEC, that's the person that runs it, they have a scanner there. They can scan it and send it along to me. Hang on to your originals, you'll need them for a portfolio project. You can fax it to me at 1-800-463-7852. That's if you're in Ontario, or 1-877-990-2023. But if you're faxing it, we put the fax to sleep most of the week, so just give me a heads up so I know, and I'll flip it on so that we get it, okay? You can scan it yourself using a scanner app, and then send it to me, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. Now, you can mail it to me, but I really discourage you from doing it. Between postal strikes and things getting lost, it takes a long time, and so it can be really just frustrating and discouraging. If you are typing your assignments on Google Docs, you are welcome to share them with me. A lot of people do that. And if you are handwriting your assignments, a lot of people will take a photograph of them and then send me those photographs through Facebook or through email. Now, if you're doing that, please make sure your photograph is really clear and not blurry at all. Preferably, you've done your writing in pen, so it's dark enough for me to read. If you've done it in a notebook and you've done like 2 pages side by side, don't take a photograph of both pages at once, because when I try to zoom in, it loses all coherence and I can't read it. Just do 1 page at a time, okay? Also, when you're doing that, don't just click the share button or the email button on your phone. Instead, take a look at your phone, and I don't know if iPhones do this, but I don't have an iPhone. It'll say email versus email as an attachment. Send it as an attachment. It's much, much easier for me to print that off. I don't know why, but it just seems to work a lot better. Now, if you're planning to do a lot at once, if you're planning to send me an entire unit, I'm going to beg you, please don't send it to me in photographs. It takes me forever to get those all downloaded and sized up and whatever. In that case, I'm going to suggest using a scanner app. They're easy to download. It's free. I use one called Adobe Scan. You download it, open it up, and then it's really just like taking a photograph, except it produces a much better quality for my purposes, so I can read it a lot better, okay? You line up the little corners and then the border, and then you take the picture. Keep on doing that until you've got all your pictures in there for that assignment. Hit continue. Then it will let you preview. You can put them in a different order. You can retake one if you got something blurry, or you can crop the page. Then hit save the PDF, give it a name, and then save it wherever you save your things. Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, wherever it is, okay? All right, moving on. Today, we are still in Unit 1, and we're beginning to talk about Lesson 4, which is all about reading strategies and skills, okay? So here are the success criteria for Lesson 4. By the end of this lesson, you will have achieved the lesson goals if you can correctly create and punctuate compound sentences, utilize a variety of reading strategies before, during, and after reading narrative materials, demonstrate understanding of narrative materials by locating information, making inferences, making connections, tracking and recording information ideas, and using a dictionary to help yourself understand unfamiliar words. Okay. So throughout lesson 1 and 2, we were looking at the basic or simple sentence structures and a bunch of simple sentence patterns we looked at, right? These is the most basic sentence structure, and it really is important to master. And if you find you're still struggling with that, do not feel like you have to go on to this. But a lot of people are comfortable writing basic sentences and do want to move on to more advanced structures, okay? We often talk in more advanced structures. So when you feel comfortable writing them as well, I find there's kind of a little bit more integrity between what you want to say and what comes across in the page, okay? So compound sentences. A compound sentence is just two smaller sentences joined together with a coordinating conjunction. There should be a comma at the end of the first sentence, like you take out that period, put a comma there, and then you add the appropriate conjunction, and then the other sentence. Each of these simple sentences is considered an independent clause. They need to have their own subject, their own verb, and they must express a complete thought all on its own. So here we have, I love going ice skating, I hate skiing. I can join those two by saying, I love going ice skating, comma, but I hate skiing. So that little comma is just kind of showing that you understand that this is a sentence all on its own, but that you're still moving on, right? All right. So coordinating conjunctions. In English, there are only 7 coordinating conjunctions. For and nor, but, or, yet, and so. And they each express a different type of relationship between the two smaller sentences or clauses. Now, keep in mind that these conjunctions can also be used to join words or phrases, not just sentences. So you don't want to think that every time you see one of those words in a sentence that it's automatically a compound sentence, because sometimes that mixes people up. So let's say I was just joining words. I like pizza or hot dogs. I like pizza and hot dogs. I'm just joining pizza and hot dogs together. She goes swimming and biking. Swimming and biking are the 2 words. I can also join phrases. Every student needs to develop their skills in reading books and writing essays. So I'm combining the 2 phrases, reading books and writing essays. It only counts as a compound sentence when I'm joining 2 independent clauses that can stand on their own and have a subject and a verb. So the gardener was busy weeding, so he didn't see the crows attacking the new seedlings. So that last one is the only type on the page that is actually a compound sentence. Now, like I said, they have different relationships, so they're not 100% interchangeable. And is probably considered the most neutral. It sort of implies that you're joining or you're adding information like, I like pizza, comma, and I like hot dogs too. But or yet both indicate contrast between the 2 different statements. I was hungry, comma, but there was nothing to eat. She was curious, comma, yet she was still cautious about the danger. And then we've got for or so. Both of those are ones that we would use when you're trying to give the reason or the purpose or the cause and effect between two things that are happening in the two sentences. So for example, I wanted to go to the movies, so I saved my money. So that was my purpose for saving my money. I spent all morning making soup, for we had guests coming for lunch. Now I want to point out, see this second for where it just says for lunch? That wouldn't have counted as a compound sentence all by itself because lunch does not have a subject and a verb and express a complete thought. Okay. Then we've got or and nor. They're both getting across the idea of choices. Or is usually like a positive or a neutral choice. Nor is for negative choices, like things you don't want. So for example, I could order pizza, or I could make some craft dinner. I did not want to eat sushi, nor did I want to get chicken fried rice. Remember that a compound sentence must have those two independent clauses, its own subject and verb, express a complete thought, and you need to use both the comma and the coordinating conjunction to be considered correct. Okay, so here is like a little practice question. This is support question number 11. Look at each sentence and identify whether it is a compound sentence. I hate swimming and I don't like the beach. Okay, well, how do I decide if it's a compound sentence? First of all, I'm going to look, is there a conjunction? Yes, and is a conjunction. On each side of the conjunction, do I have a subject and a verb? I hate swimming. Yes. I don't like the beach. Yes. Do they both express a complete thought? Absolutely. So yeah, that one would be a compound sentence. So I'm just going to make that bold right there. Oh, I can't really do that. Maybe, yeah, there we go, red. I love cats and dogs. Okay, so the word and is there. But if I look on either side of it, in front, I love cats. Okay, that's got a subject and a verb and expresses a complete thought. But on the other side of it, dogs. Dogs is not a complete thought. It's just one word. So that does not count as a compound sentence. Right? I am waiting for my friend so I can give her a ride. Okay, so the compound sentence in there is so. I'm going to look at the sentence in front of it. I am waiting for my friend. I is my subject. Am waiting is my verb, and it expresses a complete thought. I can give her a ride. That's on the other side. I is my subject. Can give is my verb, and it expresses a complete thought. So yes, that counts as a compound sentence. Mom was happy, but tired. Okay, so but is my conjunction. In front of the conjunction, mom was happy. Mom's my subject, was is my verb, and it expresses a complete thought. But on the other side of but, I just have the word tired. So it can't possibly work because I would need to have a subject and a verb and express a complete thought. There just isn't enough there. So no, that does not count as a compound sentence. Okay. Dad was planning to be home for supper, but he got stuck in traffic. So again, I've got the conjunction but there. So I'm going to look at in the front. Dad was planning to be home for supper. So dad is my subject. Was planning to be are my verbs. And the whole thing expresses a complete thought. And then afterwards, we've got he got stuck in traffic. He is a subject. Got stuck is my verb. And it expresses a complete thought. Uh-oh. Yep, that works. That works. For a second, I didn't see the conjunction. And so I got worried that didn't work, but it does. Okay, now we are looking at question number 2. So now this one is a little bit trickier. So for all of these are somebody trying to make a compound sentence, but they've forgotten one part of it. Either they've forgotten the conjunction, or they've forgotten the comma, or they don't have two independent clauses. Sorry, again, when I did this originally, it had more spaces. I don't know what happens sometimes. All right. I'm just going to finish getting these moved over. I would just use the online version, but what I find happens is every now and again, internet goes down or Google will kick you out, and then I have to kind of log back in and it takes me forever. So that's why I have to do this. Okay, so we've got the day it was cold, but I had my warm sweater on. Does it have the conjunction? Yeah, the word but is a conjunction. Does it have the comma? No, it does not have a comma where it should have. So right away, that is a part that is missing. I'm just going to turn it right because it's kind of easy to do. I was hoping to win, comma, but ultimately failed. Okay. Does it have a comma? Yes. Does it have a conjunction? Yes. Does it have two independent clauses? Okay, well, in front of but, we've got I was hoping to win. So I is my subject, and was hoping to win is a whole long verb phrase. It makes sense on its own, so that's fine. After the word but, I have the phrase ultimately failed. There's no subject there, and it doesn't express a complete thought. So I don't have two independent clauses there, so I don't have a compound sentence. Suck. Go. She was getting good grades, comma. She was also a great athlete. Okay, do I have a comma? Yes. Do I have a conjunction? I do not. So right away, it's wrong because I don't have a conjunction there like I need to have. I love Christmas, comma. It's great to see how happy everyone is. Is there a comma? Yes. Is there a conjunction? No. And again, I have to join two smaller sentences with a conjunction and a comma. If I don't have both of them, then it's technically wrong. I was looking for jobs and I got lots of callbacks. Is there a comma? No. I do have a conjunction and I do have two independent clauses, but I don't have the comma. Okay. So the reason I did this is because these are some of the most common mistakes I see when I'm marking work. Forgetting the comma is probably the most common thing. So if you're handing assignments in to me, always check for those commas, okay? All right, reading strategies. Now, reading strategies are kind of a newish thing. So if you are a little bit older like me, nobody ever mentioned anything about reading strategies when I was in school, okay? So if you've never heard of them before, you are in good company. I was completely surprised by this concept when I was first introduced to it too. But I found that it isn't really that hard. It's really just a specific way of thinking that helps you understand the text that you're reading. And all those thinking strategies are things that we basically already use, okay? We just haven't really given them a name. All of these strategies can be used either, well, almost all of them can be used before you read anything, while or during your reading, or after you're finished reading to help cement your understanding of what you read. So I'm going to go through a list and a brief explanation of some common reading/thinking strategies. First of all, it sounds fancy, but it's really pretty basic. Activate background knowledge. I feel like I should be sending a robot into space. But really all it means, activate means I'm thinking about my background knowledge. What do I already know about the text or the book I'm about to read? Okay. You might also think about what you know about the author, if it's somebody you've read before, or what you know about that particular genre, horror, romance, mystery, poetry. When you're doing this, you can also think about the vocabulary, the topics, or what kind of genre characteristics you would expect to see here to help you understand and read things more effectively. So there's a little picture there of a girl, and she is thinking about what she already knows about dinosaurs before she reads some more information. And one of the reasons for this is the best way to remember and to understand new knowledge is to link it to knowledge you already have. It's kind of like that knowledge that you already have in your brain is like a little coat hook. And we're going to hang that new knowledge onto the old knowledge and link them together. And it just makes that so much stronger. All right, making connections. You can kind of make three different connections. You can make connections to your own life. You can make connections between two different books or texts that you're reading. And you can also make connections between what's going on in the text and what's going on in the world around you. You could even do all three at once. Sometimes this can help you understand the plot or the events that are happening if it's nonfiction, or you could better understand what a character's actions and choices are. So for example, if I was reading a fictional novel about somebody who was going through the war in Ukraine, I would probably take a few minutes and start thinking about, what do I know about the war in Ukraine already? Okay. And then if I had read any other books or information about, I might compare those two. So again, it's that same idea of connecting what you already know to something new. It's just a little more personal. Asking questions. Okay, for this one, the reader is just basically asking themselves questions that they expect to find the answers to in their reading. It could be before, during, or after. You might be asking yourself things like, what's this story about? Is the main character the hero, or are they really the villain? What's the big idea in what I'm reading? How does the author make the villain so creepy? Prioritizing. Prioritizing is when the reader is reading through something and they decide what's important or it's a major detail. This is especially common with nonfiction and informational texts, right? If you've got to read a chapter in the history book, you're not going to remember every single word in that chapter. Maybe you want to think of about 10 sentences that would summarize everything in the chapter. A lot of students might underline or highlight or put little sticky notes on things they think are important and that they want to remember later on. Prioritizing kind of goes hand in hand with summarizing, okay? After you've finished a text, you look back at what did you think was a priority, and then create an overall summary of what you've read. Summary is kind of like a shorter, condensed version of a reading, right? It's not a retelling. I'm not telling every single bit. I'm looking at what were the big ideas, what were the main points, and I'm, creating a little paragraph or a little paper on that. It should capture all the most important points so that somebody who had never read the whole text would still have a good overview of what happened. Every now and again, I'll have people who, let's say it says something like, summarize in 5 sentences. And so they start to summarize, and when they get to 5 sentences, they stop, even though they've only summarized half the text. No, the summary has to cover everything you read. You can't just stop because, oh, I've hit my limit. Keep in mind, all of those limits are not limits. They're usually like a minimum. Okay, you're always fine to go over. It's that I don't want to accept less than that. Okay, visualization. This is when a student pictures the events of a story or a text in their head while they are reading. If it's nonfiction, they might still stop and try to picture comparisons, descriptions, or connections between the information. Note, I sometimes get people who are like, well, I can't draw, so I can't visualize. No, I mean, whether you can draw or not doesn't really matter. It has nothing to do with this. The thing is, can you imagine? Now, some people don't. Some people really struggle to picture things in their head. And some people don't realize that other people are doing that and have never tried. So if you've never tried to picture the events in a story in your head, I really strongly suggest it because it can make reading so much easier. Because then it's more like watching a movie rather than just reading. Okay, this is kind of a mouthful. This is self-monitoring for understanding. This is basically just as you're reading along, periodically you kind of check in with yourself and see, do I still understand what's happening or what I'm reading? If I feel confused or like things are not quite making sense, I'm going to take some actions. Maybe I stop and reread the text more slowly to see if I maybe missed some important facts. I might stop and visualize. I might stop and summarize. I might put things in my own words to see if I understood the concepts, right? There's no point just saying the words, but not understanding what you're reading. I'm going to give you an example for this. This is not my example, someone else's example. Somebody was reading a story, and it was about a birthday party. And it was talking about the person's birthday, like 1920 to 1980, say. And because they'd only ever seen 1920 to 1980 when somebody had died, they didn't get that the person hadn't died. And in their mind, They'd only ever seen those two dates kind of bookended together when a person had died. So in their mind, this person was somehow dead, but sort of wandering through the story as a ghost. And they were really confused. So they didn't really stop to think about it, or maybe to ask some questions of a neighbor or ask questions of their teacher. If you're reading something and it makes no sense, by all means, check in with me, okay? Sometimes it's just vocabulary that you don't understand, or it may just be that some things we read need a little bit of background in an area that we may or may not have. So for example, if I was reading anything about football, which I know nothing about, I would find it a really hard slog because I don't know much about it and I kind of hate football. So I would probably get confused really easy, right? So everybody has strengths and weaknesses in terms of what we understand. Inferring. Inferring is when you're trying to basically read between the lines. Sometimes authors are really direct and they just state exactly what's happening in a text and with the character's feelings. Like Susan was sad, Susan was angry. But other times, authors may be more indirect or a little bit ambiguous even about what's happening. And the reader is going to have to infer what is going on. Basically, when you're going to infer, you're going to make a reasonable conclusion based on the available facts. So it's not just a wild guess. You're looking at what you already know and making a reasonable deduction or conclusion of what you think is happening. So for example, if I see a girl crying, I might infer that she's sad. But if I then kind of zoom out and realize, oh, she's in the kitchen chopping up onions, I might infer that she's simply having a bad reaction to the smell of onions. The inferences we make about events or characters need to be checked against all the available facts and then revised as necessary. Okay, making predictions. Readers often use their inference skills and their ability to make connections in order to create reasonable predictions. Have you ever watched a mystery show and become convinced that you know who the killer is? When you're doing that, you're making a prediction based on what you know about people and how they talk, act, or think. You might also be basing your prediction on familiar plots that you've seen in other mystery shows. Sometimes people make predictions automatically as they read, but other times students might be asked to make deliberate predictions. If you've never made predictions with stories, think about movies or TV shows. Do you ever make predictions about that? Like, oh, those two are going to fall in love. Oh, I know that guy seems really nice, but I have a bad feeling he's going to turn out to be the killer because he's giving off some creepy vibes, right? Some people don't do it with books, but they've done it a lot with TV shows and stuff. It's just the same kind of idea, but when you're approaching books, you do it as well. Okay, so the names for a lot of these strategies might be new to you, but the thinking probably isn't, okay? A lot of these strategies we all use in our everyday life as we walk around and talk to people, we watch movies, we scroll on Facebook. It's just that we aren't always very aware of our own thinking because it often moves pretty quickly. And we're really focused on thinking about the world rather than sort of standing back and spying on how we're thinking. So the big idea we're trying to get across here is learning how to use these different strategies deliberately as a way to understand new texts that we read. A lot of strong readers are already doing this while they read, and they've just never put a name on it before. And what you probably will find is that some of those come really easy to you, and you do them all the time, and other ones that come really, really hard to you, and you almost never do. So that's why I'm kind of talking about this and teaching about it. So here's a little scenario. If you see the words in white on this page, the words in white are more or less the reading strategies, and the words in yellow are my examples, okay? So this is going to show you that we don't just use one strategy when we read, we use a whole bunch of different strategies. Let's say you've been assigned to read a fictional book that features a young man on a soccer team. Before you even begin reading, you might mentally review what you know about soccer, including any specialized vocabulary about soccer. This is called activating your background knowledge. As you open up the book, you might ask yourself some questions about it. Is this a story I'm going to like? Is it going to be realistic or a fantasy? Is the writer any good? As you read the first page or two of the story, you may start mentally making predictions about what might happen in the book. I bet this guy ends up in a fight with that bully. I think he might fall in love with that girl. After you have read a few chapters, you might start making connections between your own life and the plot or the characters. Geez, I hate guys like that. They always try to put everyone down. If this were me, I would deck him. You might also be visualizing the action in the story in your head, as if it were a movie. If you read a confusing part, you might stop and reread that section to make sure that you understand it, which is self-monitoring for understanding. Okay, so now we're going to look at the main parts of any short story. First of all is the plot. The plot is basically just the events of the story. For a short story, we generally only have one main central conflict. Novels that are longer might have a lot of more complicated plots and subplots, but short stories generally need to keep it much simpler because they just don't have as much space. There are several different types of conflict. A conflict is just a fancy way of saying there's a problem that exists, I don't want to say between characters, but for a character. The conflict does not necessarily result in violence. It doesn't have to be a fight, but it does create tension in the plot, and it generates interest for the reader in the story, and they're engaged in it usually. Sorry about that, guys. Fighting a cold today, so I got a little bit of a coughing fit here. Just gonna take a little drink of water and hope I don't start coughing again. A story that has no conflict is completely boring. The point of most stories is solving the conflict in some way, or occasionally discovering that you cannot solve the conflict, but something else happens instead. Okay. A sec. Types of conflict. There are generally considered to be 7 main types of conflict. The first one is internal conflict, where the person is fighting against themselves. It might be someone who's addicted, fighting against their temptation to use drugs or alcohol. A husband or a wife might be fighting the temptation to cheat. A character might be trying to develop the courage to face something hard or searching for peace. So for the visual for that, we've got kind of, the little idea of like a little devil on one shoulder and a little angel on the other shoulder. Sorry. That's that idea where you're kind of fighting with yourself, like you're divided. Part of you wants one thing and part of you wants something else. And then we've got a person versus another person. This is any kind of competition or conflict between one person and another person, or it could be a group of people, like 2 lawyers fighting to win a case, or hockey teams fighting to win a tournament, or 2 guys fighting to win the same girl. Keep in mind when I'm saying fighting, I don't mean that you're actually like throwing punches, just any situation where the main goal is you're trying to beat the other person, and you're competing against them and you're wanting to win in some way, okay? Number 3 is the person versus nature or the environment. These are often survival stories, things where the main character is fighting against a hostile environment like the desert or the Arctic, or a natural disaster such as a hurricane, a tornado, a blizzard, a flood, a drought, or an earthquake. Fighting to survive an animal attack of some sort would also fall in this category. So if you think about, a lot of people have read the story Hatchet in school. The one where the plane goes down and the guy's stuck out in the wilderness trying to survive on his own until he gets found. That would be a perfect example of a person versus nature environment. Okay, number 4, person versus society. This is where a person is fighting against the rules or the customs of the society the character lives in. That happens today, but this was a much more common plot line in, I would say, older days, where society had a much bigger influence on what people were allowed or not allowed to do. So let's say a woman wanted to be a doctor, but she's living in a time frame where there are no female doctors. She's going to have to fight against the society around her to try and achieve that goal. Then we have person versus technology. Technology is kind of anything that's been invented. Some sort of fight against a technological invention, things like a computer virus, artificial intelligence, robots, medical inventions, bioweapons, right? If you've read stories about pandemics, that would be true. The Terminator would be a person versus technology movie. Okay? And then we've got person versus fate or destiny. This is another one where you would see this a lot in older stories, and I find you see it a lot in fantasy stories. The idea that the person has sort of a certain outcome that they are going to have happen that they can't escape. And no matter how they try, everything they do leads them towards that end point. I'm trying to think of an example. You'll see this kind of thing in Shakespeare sometimes. Like somebody will make a prediction like, oh, you're going to die at the hand of a man or at the hand of your son. And so that person has a son and they kill the son because they don't want to get killed by their own son. But then it turns out that secretly there was another son somewhere else who finds out what they did and takes revenge. It's that kind of idea where you're fated, you're stuck no matter what you do, you're stuck to have something happen. And then we've got person versus supernatural. That is anything that is like ghostly or magic, zombies, vampires, werewolves, witches, elves. A lot of horror movies would have this as one of their main conflicts. Okay, here is kind of a somewhat funky little plot graph. Remember we talked about how the conflict is solved through the plot. So a plot graph is showing you the rise and fall of the plot's action or excitement. A story often starts off kind of slow and gradually gets more and more exciting, then slowly winds down. So you hear there's 4 parts. Number 1 is the introduction. That's where the story begins. Usually it reveals who the characters are, the setting, what time and place they're in, and the main conflict or problem. And then in number 2, the rising action, usually the characters are attempting to solve the conflict or the problem, but all sorts of obstacles get in their way. And that increases the tension and the excitement of the story. Then, up at 3, climax is the most exciting part of the story. This is usually where the majority of the main conflict is resolved, like the big fight scene, the big car fight, the big reveal of who the murder mystery is. In novels, there might be a big, that might happen kind of late in the book, but there will still be a lot of falling action afterwards where they resolve a lot of things. In short stories, the climax might happen almost at the very end of a story because there isn't usually as much to wrap up. So number 4, where you see things kind of getting slow again, this is where all the minor plot points get resolved in the story. Like I said, it might be quite brief in a short story. And the author is usually going to try and write an ending that emphasizes the theme or the message. Sometimes the author might leave the ending a little bit ambiguous because they want the reader to kind of think about it and puzzle over it and think about what would I do in that situation, or what do I think that character might do, or what do I think the character should do. Those are tricky to write, but there definitely are stories like that out there. Okay. B is the setting. The setting of any story encompasses both the time and the place. The time can generally be in the past, the present right now, or the future. It could be a specific year, like 1985, or something more general, like the time of the dinosaurs, or the time of the pharaohs. Sometimes the setting of a story is incidental or unimportant to the plot, like it just doesn't matter. But in many cases, it can be an important part of understanding the story. In some genres and subgenres, the setting can be a really crucial part of the story. Like when you're reading historical fiction, or science fiction or adventure stories or survival stories, mainly because things will happen due to the setting that couldn't happen otherwise. Like if you're reading historical fiction and you are taking a wagon across the states, right? No one's going to come along with a plane to rescue you. You don't have any antibiotics. You don't have um, radio, probably, or phones, all those kind of things. The setting is kind of controlling a lot of what can and what can't happen in that story. Characters. The characters in a short story tend to be pretty few in number, so the author can work on developing them as fully as possible. Usually, characters in a short story are only revealed because there's not usually a lot of time to develop their character, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the story may focus on a character's change at a single crucial point in time in their life. Most stories have a protagonist and may have an antagonist. The protagonist is usually the main character. It might be a typical hero or just an ordinary person who's kind of like the person that all the action is happening to. The antagonist, if one exists, is simply whoever they're battling against. That person doesn't need to be a villain or a bad guy, simply the person they're opposing. Two actors trying to get the same role in a movie might be equally good people, but the story is usually written from one character's perspective, and usually the reader is kind of rooting for that one character to win. Not always, but usually. Okay, flat versus round. Characters may be considered flat or rounded. When we say someone's flat, they're two-dimensional, they're simple. See my little picture here? It's like almost cartoonish. We don't know very much about them as people. And the focus may be on only one or two of their characteristics. Well-rounded characters are well-developed, three-dimensional. They've got many different characteristics. We may know a lot about their personality and their history. They may seem a lot more realistic, right? Here we have our little guy, and he's doing a painting, and he's missing a leg, and like already I'm kind of interested in what this guy's story is. Whereas, she doesn't look all that interesting. The main character or characters are the focus of the story. It's all about their actions, their choices, and their thoughts. Secondary characters usually help support the main characters, but their actions and decisions are not the main focus of the story. And then sometimes you'll have what's called minor characters. They may appear very briefly as part of the background of the story. For example, a sarcastic shopkeeper, where the main character buys his newspaper in the morning, but doesn't appear anywhere else in the book and really is not important to the story. They would be considered a minor character. And then theme or message. Theme can be a really difficult concept for many students to understand. Many people confuse the idea of a topic with the theme. Topic is what the story is about, and it's usually only one word. Common topics in stories include things like love, friendship, war, loyalty. You can probably think of lots of others. Theme is what the story is trying to tell you about the topic. Theme is a statement of opinion about the topic. So down here we've got love is my topic. My message is love is not finding someone to live with. It's finding someone you can't live without. So that's a lot more detailed. Another way to make sure you notice the difference is, again, topics are one word. Themes are a complete sentence. So topic would be loyalty. The theme could be loyalty is the most important element of friendship. The topic could be war. The theme could be some wars are justified to protect innocent people. Okay, think about some of your favorite movies or books. What are their themes? A lot of people have seen Lord of the Rings. If you've seen that, think about how you would phrase the theme. This is what I have, but you might have something slightly different. Teamwork and the willingness to sacrifice your own life for others is needed to defeat evil. Or Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. When the authorities have become corrupted, good men may have to become outlaws to achieve justice for the common man. Okay, I think we're probably not going to get through this. For Monday, we have a little short story here, and we're going to talk about it and identify all the little parts of the short story. If you want to go ahead and work on that this weekend, and then we can, when we kind of walk through it, you can kind of see, do your answers match mine? And then after we do that, we're going to move on to the story that we're going to be reading and try to use all these reading strategies that we've learned in order to understand the story really well. Okay. If anyone needs to talk to me about your assignments or anything, I am here all day tomorrow. I'd be happy to talk to you. Give me a phone call, and that'd be great. Hope you have a wonderful evening, and I will see you guys next week.